So today we are diving into the adventures of young Indiana Jones, which originally was known as the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles when I grew up watching this show. And when I was doing my research for some upcoming episodes of my favorite sci-fi shows that I do here on YouTube, that series, this doesn't actually fit into that because it's not science fiction. But I definitely think this is one of those shows you need to watch if you've never watched this before. It's definitely one of my favorite series from my youth. I've been debating rewatching this entire series in 2023 because we are coming to the end of the Indiana Jones franchise as we know it with Harrison Ford. And despite the fact that Harrison Ford wasn't a huge part of this because this is obviously the young Indiana Jones, he actually did take part in the production and filmed some scenes for this show, which shows how committed he was and is to the role of Indiana Jones. And it's one of those weird things where George Lucas has done a lot of different stuff over the years. Not all of it has been, home runs. He's done some. Yeah, if you've never watched Howard the Duck, I hesitate to suggest that you watch Howard the Duck, but also you should watch Howard the Duck because it's one of those like quintessential 80s films that just the animatronics and the puppetry is amazing, but it is a bad movie, but like laughably bad. Like if you like bad movies that make you laugh, then go watch Howard the Duck. Anyway, Indiana Jones is not one of the things that George Lucas has failed at. And what was really interesting about this show, and we're going to dive into the wiki and we're going to talk about the whole thing. This will possibly be a longer episode, I don't know. And one of the things that was really innovative about this show was that it was all filmed on location and it was all about the historical figures and events that Indiana Jones interacted with throughout his, childhood, young adulthood, growing up to become an adult, and all the way out through his life. Like just being like this character that's always in the middle of the throes of history and archaeology and everything else. So, it's the scope of what they were trying to produce here was also one of the things that killed it ultimately because it became far too expensive to produce for the time period that it was being done in because of the fact that it was all on location and just it's a very progressive endeavor at that ultimately I think came into its own later on when we were able to stand back and appreciate just what George Lucas was doing. But at the time, all anybody cared about was the money. And so it's like, oh, this is just too expensive. We can't keep doing it. And I feel like if this were done in today's era with the streaming networks and everything else, I think that, oh, ABC doesn't want to do it anymore. Netflix will step in and pick up the last three seasons. Oh, Netflix doesn't want to do it. Well, Hulu will step in and pick it up for that. So I feel like this is one of those things that could have had an extended life had it been done now as opposed to then. But it doesn't really matter because even though it ultimately did kind of peter out and get canceled, we still got a ton of great episodes which have been reformatted into the years. Like I said, originally it was called the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, and then eventually it was refactored into the Adventures of Young Indiana Jones into a series of TV films. So without further ado, let's dive on over to the wiki, which has a lot of great information. I know some people out there, oh, you can't use the wiki. Yeah, I can. Whatever. If you want to do like, doctorate, PhD research, don't use the wiki. But for general everyday YouTube videos like this, it's totally acceptable to use the wiki. So anybody out there who wants to complain, you can just flutter on away to whatever other corner of the internet you want to go through. All right, I'm gonna drink some coffee and then we're gonna dive into this. So one of the things I remember about this show is Sean Patrick Flannery being just amazing in the role of young Indiana Jones. Now, he doesn't play the only young version of Indiana Jones, but he does play the sort of young adult version. I've loved him, Boondock Saints. Like, I think Sean Patrick Flannery is a great actor. I loved him in Stargate. SG1 as well. He's done some cool stuff over the years, but this was one of his early roles that he did, and he did a great job. Just he's charismatic. He plays the part. It's really cool. And then they have a younger actor who played the Corey Carrier as the like single digit to young, teen, I believe, if I remember correctly. So it says here, this originally aired on ABC from March 4th, 1992 to July 24th, 1993. Filming took place at various locations around the world, with the old Indy bookending segments um, filmed in North Carolina. It was a Lucasfilm production, and so, and especially with Amblin and Paramount. So it explores the childhood and youth of the fictional character Indiana Jones. Primarily stars Sean Patrick Flannery as the title character in his youth, and Corey Carrier as the childhood version, with George Hall playing the elderly version of Jones for the book of most episodes, with Harrison Ford bookending one episode. It was creative and executive produced by George Lucas, who also created, co-wrote, and executive produced um, all the Indiana Jones stuff. So it says here, due to its large budget and low viewership ratings, the series was canceled in '83. However, following the cancellation, 4 made-for-TV television films were produced from '94 to '96 in an attempt to continue the series. And in 1999, all of those were re-edited into the 22 television films, which are now under the title The Adventures of Young Indiana Jones. This is actually from the IMDb page right here. So yeah, it's been refactored over the years into what this is today. So if you're wanting to watch it in 2023, this would be the version that you watch. It says here, and this is back the way. This is one of the things that I wanted to talk about because this was designed as an educational program, and it was actually used in universities and schools for a while because of how accurate its depictions were of certain historical events, and also just the chance to show things off, from a period standpoint of being able to go in and film on location, but film in a way that was being done with the period in mind. So the period clothes, period automobiles, all this other stuff. It's just really cool stuff. It's kind of like the innovation that goes on behind, beyond Assassin's Creed, the Assassin's Creed series being, overwhelmingly large AAA games. Looking at Odyssey, Origins, Odyssey, and Valhalla in particular, those 3 games produced versions of cities, of older cities, Athens in Greece, Cairo, or was it Alexandria? I forget. And then London, as an example, in Valhalla. Those versions of those cities have been done so well, and they have a tourist mode that you can turn on with those games, that those have actually been used by universities around the world to show students of history what those cities looked like in their peak, in their prime. And that's something that was very innovative about this show, because it was primarily designed as an educational program for children and teenagers. It says here, spotlighting historical figures and important events. Most of the episodes have a standard formula of an elderly 93-year-old Indiana Jones in present day New York, encountering people who spur him to reminisce and tell stories about his past adventures, either involving him as a young child of 8 to 10, played by Corey Carrier, or as a teenager aged 16 to 21, played by Sean Patrick Flannery. The younger Indy travels to different parts of the world with his parents and tutor, and the older teenage Indy rebels against his father by joining the Belgian army. And then, using fake names, he fights both at Verdun and in Africa, later becomes a spy. And in one episode, a 50-year-old Indy played by Harrison Ford is seen reminiscing. Initially, the series was planned to alternate between the adventures of Indy as a child and as a teenager, but eventually the series was dominated by Flannery's version of the character, probably because he was better on screen, I would argue. Um, and also revealed in the long run that elderly Jones has a daughter, grandchildren, and great grandchildren, with no mention of a son. But in 2008, the Kingdom of the Skull film introduced Mutt Williams as the son, with Marion Ravenwood. Now, I don't know that we've even ever met the daughter, much less the grandchildren and great grandchildren. So this is one of those things where I know people like to. This show often gets forgotten when people talk about the Crystal Skull, and they like to criticize George Lucas for things that he did and the way they didn't like the way this character was evolving in that, and how they hated the Mutt character and everything else. It's like, I don't think you guys understand that, George Lucas created that character. He could do whatever the frack he wants with that character. Like, I'm along for the ride, so I'm always going to appreciate it. But I don't know that we've ever actually met the daughter, even though we've actually met the son. I don't know that the daughter's ever been named. This might be one of those things like Yoda, where George Lucas just chose never to give any more information out about it, to keep it mysterious and just sort of have that as a sort of like set dressing that doesn't need to be explained in greater detail. By the way, I apologize if you just heard me slurp because I was like. Many of the episodes involve Indiana Jones meeting and working with famous historical figures. Leo Tolstoy, Howard Carter, Charles de Gaulle, John Ford, and then going to places like Egypt, Hungary, India, China, and whole of Europe. It's successful Curse of the Jackal prominently involves India and the adventures of T.E. Lawrence and Pancho Villa. Um, he also encounters Edgar Degas, Giacomo Puccino, George Patton, Pablo Picasso, Eliot Ness, Charles Nungesser, Al Capone. I mean, just all of these historical figures. And at one point, it says he competes against a young Ernest Hemingway for the affections of the girl, but they end up becoming friends. Haha. He's nursed back to health by Albert Schweitzer, has a passionate tryst with Matahari, discusses philosophy with Nikos Kazantzakis, and goes on safari with Theodore Roosevelt. It's pretty awesome. There's just all sorts of really cool stuff here. It says the show provided backstory for the films. His relationship with his father, first introduced in Last Crusade, was depicted in episodes showing his travels with his father as a young boy and brief times as a young adult. The original Eye of the Peacock, which is a large diamond seen in Temple of Doom, was a recurring element in several stories. It also chronicled his activities during World War I and his first solo adventure, and then later in 2008 in The Kingdom of Crystal Skull, he then references back to his adventures with Pancho Villa and when he's talking to Mutt Williams. So, really cool stuff. Now, the other thing here is that the amount of people who guest starred on this show when their acting careers were just getting going or they were early on in their acting career, this is mind blowing, which is one of the things that contributed to the show being very expensive. Because you got to remember, George Lucas was coming off of the original Star Wars trilogy and the Indiana Jones trilogy, and he was in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s with all of that star power. He hadn't done the prequels yet, so he didn't have, people didn't hate him yet. And so he pulled off some pretty impressive stuff here. So look at this. We had Catherine Zeta-Jones, Daniel Craig, Christopher Lee, Clark Gregg, Tom Courtenay, Peter Firth, Vanessa Redgrave, Beata Pozniak, Jennifer Ellie, Elizabeth Hurley, Timothy Spall, Anne Heche, Paul Freeman, John Pierre Castaldi, Jeffrey Wright. I mean, just the list goes on. Ian McDermott, Max von Sydow, Douglas Henshaw. You could just Lucas Haas in an early role. You can keep going on and on and on and on and on. It was super impressive for the time. And all of these actors who were either young actors or in the early stages of their careers. This is 92, 93. So it shot, I don't know when, does it say here in production when it shot? I'm thinking, 90, 91 it was shooting. But pretty impressive stuff here. It says during the production of Indiana Jones feature films, the cast and crew frequently questioned Lucas about the character and his life growing up. During the concept stages, I need a drink because I have a hiccup buried down here and I don't want it to come out. Coffee. So during the concept stages of Indiana Jones: The Last Crusade, Lucas and Spielberg decided to reveal some of the backstory in the film's opening scenes because we have that sequence where River Phoenix played the Young Indiana Jones stealing the cross, and he does the train sequence. He gets the hat. By the way, that transition sequence is still one of the best I've ever seen in film, where the guy puts the hat on his head and he puts his head down, and then when he pulls his head back up, he's adult Indiana Jones on the boat getting his butt kicked. It's it's so good. It says. Harrison Ford believed that Phoenix most resembled Ford as a young man. Phoenix had appeared as Ford's son in the Mosquito Coast, and the decision to reveal the adventure of a young Indiana led Lucas and the crew to create the idea of creating the series. So he then went out and wrote an extensive timeline detailing the life of Indiana Jones, assembling the elements for about 70 episodes. Starting in 1905 and leading all the way up to the feature films. Each outline included the place, date, and historical persons Indy would meet in that episode, and they get turned over to the series writers. When it came to an end, they filmed 31 of the 70 stories. Had it been renewed for a third season, he would have been introduced to younger versions of characters from Raiders of the Lost Ark, such as Abner Ravenwood and Rene Belloc. Other episodes would have been filled in the blanks between existing ones, and there would have been adventures starring a 5-year-old Indy. It says during the production of the series, Lucas became interested in the crystal skulls. They were originally in an episode that would have been part of the third series, with Jones and Belloc searching for the skulls. It was never produced. Ultimately evolved into the feature film that we got. Interesting about this is you see how Lucas wrote the scripts for 70 episodes. This also happened when he did the production for that live action Star Wars show that was never ultimately assembled. It never got into production. But he hired Ronald D. Moore and some other guys, and they created 100 scripts for a live action Star Wars television show that was going to, explore all sorts of the universe. And that, even though I don't think any of that is being used by Disney these days. All that stuff was written, and at least put down in a script format so that it could then be looked at. Ultimately, I remember Lucas talking about this years ago. It never went into production because it was going to be too expensive to do it the way he wanted it to be done with the technology at the time, and we hadn't gotten into the streaming wars and the streaming shows and everything else. So, and that was also back when they were still thinking about doing, 20 episode seasons. So the commitment for a network to come in and produce something that's going to cost, you know, conservatively, let's say we can get the costs down to 10 million an episode with all the location shooting and everything else. You're looking at a $200 million commitment per season. It probably could have that, if they did it on budget, but still very expensive for the time. And ultimately, that's what led to that show never getting off the ground. And that's ultimately what led to this show's demise, was that just the costs were too much to keep it going for what they were wanting to accomplish, because they weren't doing any green screen. It was all on location. So that's a nightmare. It's an amazing nightmare, but it's a nightmare nonetheless. It said a number of the actors connected to the films and or George Lucas' Star Wars franchise missed guest appearances. We already talked about Harrison Ford, Paul Freeman, who played Renee Belloc. It was in a couple of episodes. Roshan Seth, William Hootkins, Porkins from Star Wars, and Major Eaton from Raiders of the Lost Ark. Anthony Daniels played a French intelligence scientist. I do not remember him at all. Oh, wow. It says Clint Eastwood was approached to play the elder brother of Indiana Jones, but turned it down despite a $10 million offer. Can you imagine? They offered Clint Eastwood $10 million to guest in this show. That's a lot of money for 1992. Early 90s. That is a chunk of change. I mean, that's essentially, I would have to look up the inflation numbers, but that's got to be over 20 million by 2023 standards. That's a chunk of change for somebody. Says a variety of filmmakers wrote or directed many of the episodes, including Frank Darabont, which, if you don't know who Frank Darabont is, yeah, pretty amazing guy. Nicholas Roeg, Mike Newell, Ifemeta, Joe Johnston, Jonathan Hensley, Terry Jones. I did not know Terry Jones directed any episodes of the show. Carrie Fisher directed an episode or two, I guess. Really cool. Lucas was given a story by credit on many episodes, along with his input as creative consultant. And this we get into the filming. It says the series was unusual in that it was shot on location around the world, and partly to offset this, the series was shot on 16 millimeter film rather than 35 millimeter, and it's designed so that each pair of episodes could be broadcast separately or as a 2-hour feature film. Well, not feature film, but as a 2-hour film length episode. Each episode cost about 1.5 million. Oh, they actually have costs here. I take back the 10 million cost. It says each episode cost about 1.5 million, and the filming with Young Indy took about 3 weeks. So, okay, all right. All right, all right, all right. Segments of Old Indy were referred to as bookends. Filming a pair of them usually took a day, and most were shot in Wilmington, etc., etc., etc. The series is shot in 3 stages. The first production occurred 91 to 92. That's what I was looking for, was the production date. Consisted of 16 episodes, 5 with younger, 10 with older, and 1 with both, for a total of 17 television hours. The second production occurred from 92 to 93 and consisted of 12 episodes, 1 with the younger and 11 with the older, for 15 television hours. The third and final production occurred from 94 to 95 and consisted of 4 made-for-television movies for a total of 8 television hours, and in 96, additional filming was done in order to re-edit the entire series into 22 feature films. Really cool. So 1.5 million per episode. That's actually, really affordable, comparatively speaking. And at the time, God, I shouldn't say it's very affordable, because at the time that was a ton of money. That would be the equivalent of what I'm going to actually look this up real quick, so bear with me. 1992 dollar today. So it's double. It's double, basically, a little bit more than double. So if we were to do the math on that, I'm going to bring up a calculator here real quick. 5 0 times 13. That'd be $3.2 million per episode. Um, that's still a pretty significant chunk of change, especially when you look at the time. If we're talking about how many episodes did it say were the first 16 episodes in that first? I mean, yeah, that's chunk change. You're looking at a $50 million production. Um, so yeah, I honestly though I think the way things are filmed today, I honestly think it would get a better run if it was filmed today. It's very interesting to look at the actually cost. So you could ignore my 100 million mark earlier because I was I was way off. I was like 200 million, 10 million. Yeah, not gonna happen. It would have been 50 million by today's standards for a season. That's really low because I mean the Mandalorian is a lot more money and they only do like 8 episodes. Anyway, you got a soundtrack. It originally aired on ABC. The pilot was called Indiana Jones and the Curse of the Jackal. Was later re-edited as 2 separate episodes called Egypt, May 1908, and Mexico, March 1916. Um, by the way, looking at the episodes, one of the things I love is the titles of the episode. Um, so the original one had a Curse of the Jackal, whatever, but the rest of them were typically it's the location and the date, right? So I just like that. Now there are occasionally exceptions to that. Indiana Jones and the Mystery of the Blues, Indiana Jones and the Scandal of 1920, Indiana Jones and the Phantom Train of Doom. So there are exceptions to those, but a lot of these, I would say, argue most of them are the date and the location. Until we get to the 4 films that they did later on down the road, which aired on the Family Channel. I don't even remember the Family Channel. Huh. But I do remember watching most of these when I was a kid because my parents were like, "Yeah, Indiana Jones is safe for you to watch," and so we watched these as a kid. Now I haven't watched these since I was a kid. I'm coming back to this and doing this episode as a way to refresh my memory and also look at it again and say, "Oh, I remember this being really good. I would like to rewatch this again," which I totally am gonna. I'm gonna make time for it now. Um, Man, that would be a fun project. I don't know that the traffic would be good for it though. We'd have to see. Here's for those of you who are actually sticking through this and watching the whole thing. This is the part of the video I'm going to say. Drop a comment down below if you would like to see me do a review series of all of these. That's how I'll know. That's how I'll know you're watching the video, and that's how I'll know there's enough interest to do that. If there's actually comments down below where people are like, that sounds like fun, do it. So, let me know down there below because if you want me to, I'll take the time and I'll actually watch these and review them here on the channel. That would be a fun project. However, it has to be financially viable for me to do it. I'm in the same boat as Lucas is that I can't do something if it's not gonna, not gonna make me money. It's budgets, man. Um, Let's see here. The home media. Okay, well, that's okay. It says here that when they refilmed it, the 93-year-old indie bookends for the original series were removed for home media, as well as Sean Patrick's Family's bookend for Travels with Father. However, the Harrison Ford bookend was not cut. Of course not. You want the Harrison Ford, you know, in there. You need him in there. All right, so the rise and updated edition of the book George Lucas, The Creative Impulse by Charles Champlain explains how the series would be re-edited into the new structure of 22 chapter TV films for the VHS release. New footage shot in 1986 with pickups with the newly re-edited retitled chapters to help it better chronologically and provide smooth transitions. That's really cool. Also included in the home video release were 4 unaired episodes made for TV network. That I did not know. I've never actually watched the home release versions. Oh, that's really cool. So it's only ever been put out on Laserdisc. A DVD, has it ever been put out beyond DVD? Okay. The History Channel acquired television rights to all 94 of the DVD historical documentaries. 94? Why are there 94? Oh, is that the hold up? There was something else. This is something I remember. I remember the interview. I remember the interview with Rick McCallum about this. Okay. In 2002, series producer Rick McCallum confirmed in an interview with Variety that DVDs of the series were in development but would not be released for about 3 or 4 years. I remember this because this was around the time that, it was the press conference. Yeah. In 2005, at the press conference for Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, in that DVD, McCallum explained that he expected the release to consist of 22 DVDs, which would include around 100 documentaries that would explore the real life historical aspects that are fictionalized in the show. For the DVDs, Lucasfilm upgraded the picture quality of the original 16mm prints and remastered the soundtracks. And this, along with the efforts to get the best quality masters and bonus material on sets, delayed the release, and it was ultimately said the release would tie into the release of the fourth Indiana Jones feature film. Two variations of Volume 1 were released by CBS DVD. And then it says the History Channel acquired the rights to all 94 of the DVD historical documentaries. The airing of the documentaries was meant to bring in ratings for the History Channel and serve as marketing for the DVD release and the theatrical release of Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. They began airing the episodes on Saturday morning at 7 a.m. on the History Channel and every Sunday morning. A new division of History.com was created devoted to the show. Paramount and Lucasfilm had already okay, that was because they'd already reserved IndianaJones.com for the movie. Star Wars.com temporarily served as the official site for the DVDs. Lucasfilm and Paramount eventually set up a website. I'm going to go see if that website is still up, youngindy.com. Well, we'll let that load while I'm doing this. They released a press kit for the media promoting the DVDs. Promotes, it's a PDF, interviews with Lucas and McCallum, footage from the DVDs. Lucas and McCallum hope that the DVDs will help to schools, as they believe the series is a good way to aid in teaching history. Lucas wanted to shop the DVD release as films for modern day high school history class. And the plan was always to tie the DVD release of the series to the theatrical release of the fourth film, which released in 2008. So it says, yeah, companion historical documents. I've never watched these. Never. It says 94 historical documentaries were created over a nearly 5-year period by Lucasfilm's documentary crew for the DVD release of the series. Each documentary covers a historical topic connected to the chapter which is associated. The television broadcast rights for these documentaries was secured by the History Channel. The Young Indie website does not work. I need to know, where do I find this? Look at all these episodes. So this is called, what is it even called? I'm going to have to look this up really quick, guys. I'm going to look this up while we're here live on the video, because I remember these now. I remember watching McCallum talk about these in the press stuff for Revenge of the Sith, and I never watched. Chris and I mean, especially Chris. Chris loves documentaries, so this is something we can actually. And there's 94 episodes. Wonder how long they are. But look at all these. Archaeology, unearthing our past. Howard Carter and the tomb of Tutankhamun. Colonel Lawrence's War from Slavery to Freedom. Oh man. At Home and Abroad. The Two Faces of Jan Smuts. Albert Schweitzer's Reverence for Life. This is really cool. And then there's historical overview lectures. Okay. We're gonna have to dive into this. Anyway, the series was nominated for 18 Emmy Awards, won 6. Really cool. All right, let's look this up really quick before I wind this episode down, because I want to know more about this. What would this be called? Indiana Jones historical documentary. Okay, so they're listed on IMDb as this. The question I have is, where do I get my hands on these? Yeah, because it's got all of these historical people, experts talking about things. I'm going to have to look this up, ladies and gentlemen, and try to find out where I can find these, and see if they're even available in digital format or if they're only available in DVD. Anyway, that's a whole nother rabbit hole. We're 30 minutes in. This is, I told you it was going to be a longer episode today. So normally these are like 10, 15 minutes long. We're 30 minutes in. The Adventures of Young Indiana Jones, which originally was called the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles. I have great memories of this show growing up with it and being an early teenager and watching these episodes. I really want to try to, see if I can't find a way to watch these. I think this would be a great thing to do with Chris, because she loves documentaries, and so any historical stuff. And I think it holds up pretty well because it's evergreen content because we're not dealing with anything that's topical. It's historical, and it's fictionalized versions of history. Matter of fact, I might just go find get this prepped and not even tell her. Just be like, hey, we're going to start a new series. Let's watch these and see what she says. I need to find more information about the 94 documentary episodes. So that's what my mission today is going to be, to find more information about that and see if I can't track those down and find a way to get a hold of those. In any case, you've got to the end. Hopefully, I've inspired you to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. Support if you can, everybody. Like, this is my job. So, thanks to those of you who can support and do, because it keeps the bills paid. The lights on, the cat's fed, all those good things. Super chats, super thanks, memberships here on the channel, the Patreon page. There is a Discord. Links are down below. So, just click the buttons down there, figure out which way you can contribute. There's lots of different ways, pre-programmed amounts, or you can program your own, whatever you want to do. $2, $50, $500, whatever you can do. Thanks so much, everybody. I will see you in the next episode. Until then, stay safe and happy viewing.